A soft November drizzle lent the cemetery an air of mournful stillness when Victoria Blackwood arrived at her son's gravesite and found a young black single mother weeping there alongside a small child. She was utterly stunned. Victoria froze, gloves clutching a bouquet of white calla lilies. At 55, she had never seen these two before. At the marble headstone marked Adrian Blackwood, a young black woman in a worn coat knelt, cradling a little boy in her arms, both of them sobbing as though the entire world had just fallen apart. "I'm sorry," Victoria's voice rang out, cold and commanding, shattering the quiet sorrow of the graveyard. "This is a private moment. You shouldn't be here." Startled, the young woman looked up, her tear-streaked eyes locking on Victoria. "I'm sorry. I didn't know anyone else would be visiting today," she stammered, her voice trembling, yet beneath the fear there was a curious strength that took Victoria by surprise. "And who are you?" Victoria demanded, authority and control immediately flaring within her. "And why are you crying in front of my son's grave?" The child, a boy of about 4, lifted his green eyes to Victoria. They were startlingly familiar. The same vivid shade she had gazed into every day for decades, the same eyes her son Adrian had. The young woman rose, gathering herself with an air of dignity that both surprised and unsettled Victoria. "My name is Emily Parker, and this is my son Tyler. I work at the little diner in town. I come here every month because—" She paused, glancing down at the boy with a tenderness that made Victoria's heart tighten. "Because Adrian meant everything to us." Victoria felt the ground tilt beneath her. Adrian had died 3 years ago in a tragic car accident at 28, snuffing out all her hopes for the Blackwood legacy. She had spent years poring over every scrap of his life, searching for clues to understand his sudden passing, but she had never found any record of a serious relationship, much less a child. "How important?" Victoria asked, doubt lacing her tone. The rain began to fall harder, yet neither mother nor grandmother flinched. Emily met her gaze with unwavering courage. "So important that Tyler is Adrian's son," she said quietly. "And I promised Adrian that no matter what happened, I would always care for him." The bouquet slipped from Victoria's hands, the pristine white petals scattering across the cold marble. For 3 years, she had mourned her only child, believing the Blackwood bloodline had ended with him. And now, here was a biracial grandson, raised by a young single mother, whose existence she had never imagined. Yet deeper than Tyler's presence, Victoria sensed another hidden truth in Emily's steady eyes, a guarded secret beneath her fragile exterior, a fear tightly concealed. What Victoria did not yet know was that today's encounter was only the beginning of a series of dramatic revelations, enough to shake the foundations of the privileged world she had spent her life building. Usually, Victoria visited the cemetery in the late afternoon, when shadows lengthened and curious eyes were few. But today she stopped dead in her tracks, speechless at the sight before Adrian's grave. A young black mother in a faded coat and scuffed shoes knelt in sorrow, while a small boy stood by her side, his innocent face streaked with tears. Victoria remained motionless, her heart pounding with confusion. It had been 3 years since Adrian's untimely death, and no one had ever come to visit his grave besides her. Who were these strangers, and why were they weeping at her son's resting place? Suspicion flared behind her steely eyes. With measured steps, her high heels tapped a decisive rhythm on the stone pathway, shattering the cemetery's hush. The young woman glanced over her shoulder, her eyes red but resolute, while the little boy looked up at Victoria, his green eyes shining with a startling familiarity. "Excuse me," Victoria said, her tone icy and imperious. "This is private." She paused. "Who are you, and what are you doing at my son's grave?" Emily rose unsteadily, tears still glistening on her cheeks, yet her posture unbowed. In a clear voice that cut through the autumn air, she replied, "My name is Emily Parker, and this is Tyler, my son." Her words, soft yet unwavering, hung in the rain-soaked silence. "We're here because Adrian was everything to us." The revelation struck Victoria like a dagger. Adrian, her only child, whose tragic end she had mourned in solitude, was connected to this stranger and her son in ways she had never imagined. The lilies slipped from her grasp, petals drifting onto the cold headstone. For 3 years, she had believed her line ended with Adrian's death, her grief forging an unbroken solitude. But now, destiny had delivered a grandson, an heir she never knew existed. The sky darkened, the rain falling in earnest, as the two women stood facing each other amid the echoes of loss and secrets yet to be revealed. In that solemn moment, Victoria realized that this was only the beginning, a turning point that would unravel hidden truths and reshape the Blackwood legacy forever. November's raindrops fell harder, thumping against Victoria Blackwood's black umbrella in rapid succession. The tension between her and the mysterious young woman seemed to freeze time right before Adrian's cold marble grave. Victoria bent to pick up the fallen bouquet of calla lilies, now sullied by mud and grime. Her gloved hands trembled slightly. Whether from the chill or the unease spreading through her chest, she couldn't tell. "Important to you, is he?" Victoria looked up, her eyes icily amused. "Adrian never mentioned you, let alone a child." Emily Parker didn't reply at once. She paused, choosing her words carefully in that delicate moment, then reached out to smooth the boy's hair, her gaze warm and gentle, a stark contrast to Victoria's frosty stare. "Adrian never meant to hurt you," Emily said, her voice quavering but steady. "He always said you were strong, in control of everything. But when it came to Tyler, he didn't want you to know, not yet." Victoria arched an eyebrow, her expression registering derision. "So you're saying that Adrian, my only son, secretly fathered a child with someone I've never even heard of?" "No, Mrs. Blackwood." Emily met her gaze defiantly. "Tyler is Adrian's son, but I'm not his birth mother." Victoria froze, her powerful green eyes widening in shock. She glanced at Tyler, really looking at him for the first time. Those vivid green eyes, the same she'd seen every day in the mirror for decades, sent a chill down her spine. "Then who is this child's mother?" Victoria's voice dropped, heavy with suspicion. "And why did Adrian never mention her?" Emily inhaled deeply, standing a little taller, her eyes composed as if she'd rehearsed this answer many times. "Tyler's mother is Jessica Blackwood, your cousin. Have you never heard of her?" Jessica. The name struck Victoria like a cold blade. A blurred memory of a blonde girl with bright eyes, Robert Blackwood's daughter, surfaced in her mind. A past she thought long buried crashed back like a tidal wave. "Jessica?" Victoria echoed, her eyes narrowing in rare hesitation. "How do you know her?" Unflinching, Emily replied, "Jessica and I were childhood best friends. We grew up together after her father, Robert, was disowned by this family. Adrian met Jessica in college. They fell deeply in love, but Jessica was terrified to reveal her identity to him. She knew you'd never approve." Victoria felt as if a boulder pressed on her chest. Emily's words piercing her core, yet she swiftly regained her composure, her voice hardening into a sharper edge. "This sounds like a cheap fairy tale. You think a few words will convince me?" Slowly, Emily bent down and withdrew a slightly crumpled old photograph from her coat pocket, handing it to Victoria. Her sorrowful eyes mirrored the overcast sky above the cemetery. Victoria took the photo, her hand trembling as she saw Adrian's radiant smile beside a beautiful blonde woman. They looked blissfully happy. That woman was Jessica, and standing just behind them was Emily Parker, smiling gently as the silent witness to their forbidden love. Adrian truly loved Jessica, Emily continued, her voice thick with emotion but unwavering. Tyler is the fruit of that love. Jessica died giving birth to him, and Adrian begged me to raise him as my own. For 3 years, I've kept that promise. Adrian didn't want you to know. He feared your fury would put Tyler in danger. Victoria said nothing. She stood motionless in the biting rain, the photograph burning her pride with every drop. This secret, so vast, had shattered everything she believed in. Tyler's existence, the Blackwood bloodline she thought ended with Adrian, had become an undeniable truth. Emily gently drew Tyler closer, her eyes never leaving Victoria's, steel under the sorrow. Tyler is your grandson, but remember, Adrian wanted me to protect him at all costs, and I intend to keep that promise. Victoria remained frozen, Emily's words ringing like a warning. In that moment, she realized this meeting was no coincidence. It was the start of a battle of wills she never saw coming. Victoria left the cemetery long after the rain had stopped, yet the damp chill clung to her still. The sleek black Rolls-Royce rolled quietly through Woodlawn's gates, leaving behind Emily Parker clutching Tyler, standing alone in the deserted grounds. Victoria fixed her gaze in the rearview mirror, Emily's final words echoing in her mind, equal parts warning and unspoken challenge. As soon as she arrived at the estate, Victoria summoned David Reed, her trusted assistant who handled her most sensitive requests with discretion and speed. "David," she said, her voice cool and decisive, "I need a full, detailed, and utterly confidential investigation into a woman named Emily Parker. I want to know who she is, where she's from, what she's been doing these past 3 years, and above all, what exactly Tyler's relationship to Adrian is. Leave nothing out." David paused for a moment, then replied softly, "I'll start right away, Mrs. Blackwood." Over the next several days, Victoria maintained her usual icy composure, though inside she felt a relentless storm. Each afternoon she retreated to her private study to await the incoming reports. Finally, after nearly a week of intensive inquiry, a black leather dossier landed on her desk. She opened it slowly, her eyes skimming the pages until they paused on a candid photo of Emily working behind the counter at the Sunshine Diner. In the grainy shot, Emily wore a faded apron, her hair neatly tied back. Exhaustion visible in her determined expression. Another image showed her emerging from a Quick Mart in the dead of night, her face drawn after a long shift. The report itself was clinical, thorough, and stark. Emily Parker, age 28, resides in a small apartment on the city's outskirts. No immediate family nearby except an aunt, Helen Parker, a retired law professor in Chicago. Emily works 60 hours a week, days at Sunshine Diner, nights at Quick Mart Convenience. Financially strained, frequently behind on rent. An unstable living situation for a child like Tyler. Victoria frowned, not at Emily's poverty, which only confirmed her controllability, but at the report's final bombshell. No official records exist for Tyler's birth mother. No valid birth certificate, hospital records, or related documentation. It's as if Tyler's birth mother never existed on paper. Victoria set the dossier aside and tapped her manicured fingers against the gleaming mahogany desk, her habitual gesture when fury threatened to overtake her. From Adrian's childhood onward, she had known every person in his life. Yet here were Jessica and Emily, two women Adrian had kept hidden, a betrayal she never imagined possible. Still, she sensed there was more Emily Parker wasn't revealing. A single mother scraping by did not align with the steely resolve Victoria had seen in that graveyard stare. As she pondered, her phone buzzed. David's measured voice came through the line. "Madam, there's another detail about Emily Parker you should know." "Go on," Victoria replied coolly. "We discovered she's been attending evening law classes at a local school for the past 3 years. She's not just a hard-working single mother, she's an ambitious law student. It appears she has a very deliberate plan." Victoria narrowed her eyes, a cold smile curling her lips. Her voice sharpened to a razor's edge. "A poor single mother working 2 jobs somehow finds time to study law at night? That's not simple, David. Dig deeper. I want to know exactly what Emily Parker is up to." She hung up and stared out the tall windows at the city burning in the sunset. In that moment, suspicion and vigilance surged within her. Emily Parker was no accidental entanglement of Adrian's past. She was hiding something far greater, a secret that could threaten the financial empire Victoria had spent her life building. Victoria rose and approached the window, her gaze as cold and relentless as ever. A decision crystallized in her mind. "Emily Parker, whatever you're hiding, I will uncover it, and you will pay dearly if you defy me." Her whisper was carried away by the gathering dusk, marking the start of a silent war, and Victoria Blackwood had never lost a battle. The next afternoon, the sky above the Blackwood Industries tower was unnaturally overcast, reflecting the tension gnawing at Victoria's mind. From the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office on the topmost level, she could see the city spread out below. Skyscrapers shrouded in gray mist, tiny ants of people scurrying about. But today, none of it mattered. She was waiting for her fateful meeting with the young woman named Emily Parker. A soft chime from the internal phone jolted her back to the moment. Victoria straightened, smoothed the lapels of her perfectly tailored black blazer, and restored her signature icy composure. "Send her in." The heavy mahogany door swung open, and Emily stepped inside in simple attire. A worn white blouse tucked into faded blue jeans, her hair neatly pinned up. Yet her eyes were calm and confident, undeterred by the opulence surrounding her. "Please have a seat, Miss Parker." Victoria gestured toward the low chair across from her massive desk, making clear who held the power here. "I'll stand, ma'am," Emily replied softly, her gaze meeting Victoria's without a flicker of hesitation. Victoria's eyebrow rose in mild displeasure, but she remained composed. She opened a desk drawer, withdrew a check already made out, and placed it on the polished wood, sliding it toward Emily. $200,000, she announced. "Enough for you to start a new life, one far more comfortable than you can provide Tyler. In return, he will come to live with me. Enjoy every opportunity you never could. You may visit on weekends if you wish." Emily's eyes dropped to the check. Then she lifted her gaze to Victoria with a flash of anger and unmistakable contempt. "You're trying to buy your own grandson?" she asked, her voice deceptively calm. Victoria offered a cold smile, shrugging as though pitying Emily's naivete. "Tyler deserves a far better upbringing than you can give. Don't let your misplaced pride jeopardize his future." Emily let out a bitter, humorless laugh. She stepped forward, looking straight into Victoria's hardened eyes. "Pride? Tyler isn't merchandise for you to haggle over. He's a human being, your blood. And, more importantly, he's Adrian's son. Adrian wanted me to care for him, not for your money, but because I truly love him." Victoria felt the heat of Emily's conviction, but she remained unflinching. To her, power lay in control of wealth, and she had never lost a negotiation. "Be realistic, Miss Parker," Victoria said coolly. "Love doesn't pay rent, and it can't buy Tyler a top-tier education. Don't let emotion cloud your judgment." Emily said nothing. She bent, picked up the check, studying it carefully. Victoria allowed herself a small, satisfied smile, sure that she had won the first round. Then, in one swift motion, Emily tore the check in half. The ripping paper echoed like a declaration of war against Victoria's pride. "Tyler is not a commodity, and I am not the helpless pauper you presume I am. You can buy anything, but you'll never buy the love I have for him." Victoria sprang to her feet, astonished and enraged for the first time. She advanced on Emily, her voice low and dangerous. "You think that stunt makes you powerful? I can destroy your life in a matter of hours. My resources are beyond your imagination." Emily stood her ground, her confidence as unshakable as steel. "I don't doubt that, Mrs. Blackwood, but there's one thing you still don't understand about me. I have spent 3 years preparing for this day. I am not afraid of you, or your power. The only thing I fear is that Tyler might grow up to embody the cold indifference of a woman who values money and influence above all else." Victoria felt a surge of fury, but she forced it down. Her voice became a razor's edge. "You will regret this foolish display, Emily Parker. Mark my words." Emily offered a slight serene smile, bowed her head once, and turned to leave. Yet, just before the door closed, she paused and cast one final look at Victoria, eyes ablaze with determination. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "but I'm the one who won't be sorry, Mrs. Blackwood." When the door shut, Victoria remained rooted in place, feeling for the first time in years that she had lost control. The seemingly fragile young woman before her had openly challenged Victoria's authority, and had clearly prepared for this battle long ago. A true war had begun, and for the first time, Victoria Blackwood was not certain she would prevail. After the office door slammed shut, the vast room fell into a suffocating silence. Victoria stood motionless for a few seconds, her gaze fixed on the empty space where Emily Parker had just been, bitterness and fury tightening around her throat. Never before had Victoria been so directly and boldly challenged, especially by a young single mother with no social standing. A few minutes later, she picked up the phone and called David, her voice ice cold. "David, assemble the legal team. I want a custody petition for Tyler filed by tomorrow morning. Emily Parker needs to understand that if she defies me, she will lose everything." David responded calmly. "Understood, Mrs. Blackwood. We'll have everything ready." Victoria hung up, a flash of satisfaction crossing her face. But just as she prepared to relax, her desk phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but she answered in her usual steely tone, "Victoria Blackwood speaking." The confident voice on the other end made her freeze. "Hello, Mrs. Blackwood. It's Emily Parker." Victoria gripped the phone, anger flaring anew. "Emily, don't you understand your situation? You'll regret your attitude." Emily let out a short, sharp laugh that made Victoria bristle. "I'm not calling to apologize or beg your forgiveness. I'm calling to warn you that threats of power and legal action won't work on me. You think you can use money and influence to snatch Tyler from me that easily?" Victoria drew a steady breath. regaining her composure but remaining cold. "I don't need your permission to protect my grandson. I will use every legal means to reclaim Tyler, the child with Blackwood blood, entitled to every right of a true Blackwood." A brief silence. Then Emily's voice cut through like a blade. "Rights? You really want to talk about rights? Adrian told me so much about you, Mrs. Blackwood. He spoke of a lonely childhood, birthdays marked by expensive gifts instead of a mother's presence, of football games he longed for you to attend only to see an empty seat in the stands. Is that the kind of rights you want for Tyler?" Victoria felt as if someone had stabbed her heart. A dark, bitter memory she'd kept locked away surged back. "You know nothing about Adrian and me," she managed, her voice trembling with emotion she barely contained. Emily was unshaken. "I know more than you imagine, Mrs. Blackwood. Adrian lived in your colossal shadow, always seeking your approval and never receiving it. He left this world feeling alone and disappointed, but before he died, he told me he would never let Tyler live like that." Victoria sprang to her feet, her eyes blazing with a mix of fury and hurt. For the first time, she felt truly threatened, not by wealth or power, but by the honest, piercing words of this young woman. "Enough!" Victoria almost screamed. "Who do you think you are to judge me? Adrian was my son, and I know how to raise him best." "Adrian said you only know how to control people with power and money," Emily replied coolly. "But Tyler doesn't need your power or money. He needs a family, love, and genuine care, things Adrian never got from you." Victoria felt Emily's words rip away the mask of strength she'd worn for decades. Her hands trembled with rage and fear, not of Emily's power, but of the painful truth she'd tried to bury. "You'll regret your words, Emily Parker. I swear you will lose everything," Victoria hissed, her voice thick with bitter resolve. Another silence, then Emily's calm, chilling reply. "I don't doubt your ability to destroy, but I'm certain that when this is over, the one who loses everything won't be me. It will be you, for underestimating the power of true love." Emily hung up, leaving Victoria alone in the crushing silence. She sank into her chair, hollow-eyed, staring out at the city below. For the first time in all her years of wielding power, Victoria Blackwood felt truly vulnerable. Not to wealth or influence, but to a young, single mother who had laid bare her soul. She realized this was no ordinary fight. It was a battle for her very soul, a soul long lost to power, ambition, and loneliness. And now, Victoria Blackwood knew she faced a truly formidable enemy, the truth. The next afternoon, the sky over the Blackwood Industries tower was unusually gloomy, mirroring the tension still churning in Victoria's office. Meanwhile, across town, Emily Parker stepped into her small apartment bathed in soft golden light. Inside that modest space, warmth and intimacy enveloped her. A stark contrast to the cold, power-charged atmosphere Victoria had left behind. As she entered the living room, Emily spotted her Aunt Helen seated on the well-worn cream sofa. Helen, now in her 50s, had her silver-streaked hair neatly pinned up, and her eyes brightened when she saw her niece. "How are you holding up, Emily?" she asked gently. Emily offered a determined smile. "I'm okay, Aunt Helen. But just like you warned, Victoria's already making her moves. She's threatened me with legal action directly." Helen nodded, concern flickering across her face but tempered by quiet confidence. A retired law professor from the University of Chicago, she understood better than anyone the danger posed by someone like Victoria Blackwood. "We always knew this day would come," Helen said softly but firmly. It's time to put to use everything we've been preparing for these past 3 years." Emily's eyes glinted with resolve. She crossed to a small desk by the window where Professor Michael Bennett, a renowned Columbia law scholar, was reviewing neatly organized files. Beside him sat Amanda Torres, an investigative reporter famous for exposing the country's biggest political and financial scandals. Professor Bennett looked up at Emily, his expression serious yet reassuring. "The evidence you've gathered is impressive. Used correctly, we can bring down Victoria's entire financial empire, but you must be prepared mentally. Once this begins, there's no turning back." Emily took a seat and met the eyes of her closest allies. "I understand the stakes, Professor. I've waited for this moment for so long. For 3 years, I've stayed up every night collecting even the smallest scraps of evidence on Victoria's illegal dealings, money laundering, corruption, secret contracts with politicians. I can't let Tyler end up in the hands of the woman who ruined his father's life." Amanda sipped her coffee, her gaze sharp and eager. "Emily, I've covered powerful figures before, but I've never seen someone with such comprehensive, detailed intelligence. Just releasing a few pages of this will shock the entire financial world. Victoria Blackwood really underestimated you." Emily looked at Amanda with deep gratitude. "But I don't want to stop at a news expose. I want real justice. Tyler deserves to live in truth and love, not in her cold, illusory world." Helen placed a comforting hand on Emily's shoulder, her eyes warm with pride. "You've grown so much these past years, Emily. When your parents died, I wondered if you'd have the strength to go on, but seeing you stand up to someone like Victoria, I'm so proud of you." Emily squeezed her aunt's hand and glanced at the mountain of contracts and classified documents on the desk, the fruit of 3 years of secret preparation, night school law classes, and every spare moment devoted to gathering proof. Whenever she felt like giving up, Tyler's innocent face floated into her mind, reminding her why she had to be strong. Professor Bennett rose and moved to the window, staring out at the city's shimmering night lights. His voice was steady and clear. "Tomorrow, Victoria will officially launch her legal attack, but I guarantee it won't go as she expects. We have enough evidence to completely turn the tide. Now, it's just a matter of timing, when to release our strongest documents." Emily met his gaze, her resolve unshakable. "We'll wait until Victoria feels most secure, until she thinks she's in total control. Then I'll release the evidence that she can't defend. She built her empire on other people's pain, and now she'll have to face the consequences of her actions." Amanda nodded in approval, excitement shining in her eyes. "Victoria always relies on her absolute power, but she's never faced an opponent like you, someone willing to sacrifice everything to protect what matters most. This time, we'll make her pay." Looking around at her team, Emily felt confidence and strength flood her for the first time in months. She was no longer the vulnerable young single mother. She was ready to confront Victoria Blackwood head-on. Victoria, who believed the world must bow before her. And this time, Emily would prove that courage and perseverance are far more powerful than wealth or influence. The real battle, for justice and love, was about to begin. The next morning, dawn's pale light filtered through the heavy cream-colored drapes, casting a soft glow across Victoria's massive mahogany desk. She sat in silence, her fingers tapping the wood in a steady rhythm as she waited for her lawyer's call. The night before, she'd decided to unleash her first legal move to regain control, but today, inexplicably, she felt uneasy. When the phone finally rang, Victoria snapped it up, her tone as cold and confident as ever. "Richard, what's the situation? Has the complaint been filed?" Richard Thornton, her longtime attorney, always unflappable, fell silent for a few seconds before replying, his voice edged with tension. "Mrs. Blackwood, we've run into an unexpected problem. Emily Parker has officially retained Morrison, Caldwell, and Pierce to represent her." Victoria shot upright, confidence draining from her face. She knew that name well. Morrison, Caldwell, and Pierce weren't just any law firm. They were the legal world's most feared hunters, celebrated for high-stakes civil rights and power abuse cases. "That's impossible," she breathed. Where would Emily get the funds to hire them? Richard hesitated, then said, "They're representing her pro bono. I believe they see this as the perfect chance to make an example of you and Blackwood Industries. Emily and her counsel have made it very clear, if we persist in seeking custody of Tyler, they'll immediately file a public lawsuit alleging discrimination and abuse of power against a struggling single mother." A surge of anger and anxiety flooded Victoria's chest. For the first time, she truly felt threatened. Not by money, influence, or a business rival, but by a young single mother she'd assumed she could easily crush. "They have no grounds to sue me over this," Victoria forced out, her voice unsteady. "I'm just trying to give Tyler a better life, and they call that discrimination?" Richard cleared his throat, as if expecting her pushback. "From Emily's lawyer's perspective, you're using your wealth and power to pressure her into forfeiting her parental rights. That's a very strong argument in today's courts. I'm afraid if we press on, we'll find ourselves in a far tougher legal battle than anticipated." Victoria sank back into her chair, her palms suddenly slick with sweat. She stared out the wide window at the busy city below, feeling more powerless than ever. This was the first time she'd been forced onto the defensive by a legal position stacked so heavily against her. Richard continued, softer now, but still concerned. "Emily and the firm are ready to produce extensive evidence about how you treated Adrian in the past. They maintain you lack the emotional capacity to raise Tyler, and Adrian's own childhood experiences will be cited as proof." Victoria's heart clenched. Each word was a blow to the pride she'd built her life upon. Clearly, Emily had prepared meticulously, and this time Victoria had underestimated her. "Richard," Victoria said with difficulty, "tell me honestly, do we have any chance of winning?" Her lawyer was silent a moment, then answered thoughtfully, "There's always a chance, but Morrison, Caldwell, and Pierce never take a case they don't believe they can win. Having them in Emily's corner makes this fight significantly harder than we first thought. We need extreme caution if we're to pursue this custody action." When Victoria hung up, her hand trembled as she set the phone down. She stood and walked slowly to the window, eyes fixed on the traffic below, her mind a blank. The image of Emily Parker, calm and fearless in her office yesterday, haunted her like a specter. It dawned on Victoria with chilling clarity. She was up against a woman who had spent 3 years quietly readying for this battle, who'd not only refused Victoria's fortune, but dared to challenge the absolute power Victoria had always wielded. A profound unease welled within her. She realized she may have made the gravest mistake of her life, underestimating Emily Parker. Now, that seemingly weak young mother had leapt far ahead, and for the first time, Victoria Blackwood understood that this fight would not be as easy as all her previous victories. From today on, she wasn't just fighting for Tyler. She was fighting to protect her own reputation and the empire she had built, against an opponent who'd spent years crafting the perfect strike, waiting for the right moment to unleash it. And the scariest thought of all was this: Emily's first move had only just begun. The days that followed found Victoria plunged into extreme tension. The confidence and authority she had always displayed began to crack, especially after receiving a text from an unknown number containing just 3 words: Just wait. It wasn't an ordinary warning. It signaled a direct, ruthless assault that had been meticulously planned. And on that Monday morning, the thing Victoria feared most finally happened. The moment she stepped out of her familiar Rolls-Royce to enter the Blackwood Industries headquarters, she was suddenly blocked by a team of FBI agents in black overcoats. Amid the stunned looks of employees and passers-by, one agent held up a search warrant. Victoria Blackwood, the FBI has obtained a warrant to search and investigate Blackwood Industries for allegations of money laundering, corruption, and tax fraud. Victoria felt her heartbeat stall. Before she could react, her phone buzzed relentlessly in her pocket. A terse, urgent message from her lawyer, Richard Thornton, appeared on the screen. Victoria, the IRS has just frozen all company accounts and assets. It's critical. Victoria froze in place, every breath growing more difficult. Then her phone buzzed again. A link from the city's largest news outlet, displayed in bold. Victoria Blackwood's dark empire exposed, stunning network of illicit deals revealed. She hurriedly tapped the link, hands trembling as she saw Amanda Torres's byline, the renowned investigative reporter, alongside a series of in-depth articles unveiling irrefutable evidence of the secret, criminal operations Victoria thought were untouchable. Amanda's sharp words cut to the bone. Leaked by Emily Parker, a young single mother once threatened by billionaire Victoria Blackwood, these top-secret documents expose forged contracts, multi-million-dollar bribes, and a vast money-laundering network run directly by Blackwood for years. Victoria's darkest secrets, those she had spent her life burying, were now laid bare, mercilessly exposed to the world. Loyal employees fled the building in panic. FBI agents swarmed the floors, seizing files and hard drives. Chaos, fear, and desperation erupted everywhere, while Victoria stood at the eye of the storm, realizing she had utterly lost control. It can't be. Emily couldn't have had this information, Victoria whispered, her voice hollow with panic. Her phone buzzed again. The caller ID read Emily Parker. Victoria's hand shook as she answered. Emily's calm, icy voice came through. "Good morning, Victoria. I hope you're enjoying the consequences of what you did to others." Victoria gripped the phone, her voice quavering. "Emily, do you think this will beat me? I still have powerful friends." Emily cut her off, unflinching. "Powerful friends? You've already lost everything, Victoria. I spent 3 years preparing. Every file, every email, every contract you thought you erased. I've lived for this moment, when you'd face the truth of your actions. You used money and power to control Adrian, to control everyone, but you forgot one thing you can't buy or manipulate: the truth." Victoria felt her knees weaken. She could not find words to challenge the force and conviction behind Emily's utterance. Emily's tone grew colder still. "Adrian spent his life trying to please you, yet you never truly loved him. Your cold ambition drove him to his death. Now you will spend the rest of your days in regret as investigators uncover the crimes you've committed." Victoria tried to protest, her voice barely more than a whisper. "You'll never understand what I've endured." After a brief pause, Emily delivered her final blow. "I don't need to understand you, Victoria. I just need you to understand the cost of greed and cruelty. You believed yourself untouchable. Today, I've proven otherwise." Emily hung up, leaving Victoria alone, desperate and terrified, amid the wreckage of her empire. She looked around and, for the first time, realized that the entire edifice of power, wealth, and control she had built had collapsed in a matter of hours. FBI agents continued to haul out boxes of damning evidence, and journalists swarmed outside, camera flashes piercing the chaos. And in that maelstrom, Victoria confronted the harshest truth. She had underestimated Emily Parker for far too long. Now, it was Victoria who would pay the price, her darkest secrets laid bare for the world, in the most painful, ruthless way imaginable. Amid the chaos and despair engulfing her empire, Victoria retreated to her sprawling mansion, the very symbol of her absolute power. Now that grand house felt cold and empty. Each heavy footstep echoed hollowly through the halls. It seemed her world had collapsed in an instant, yet the most painful moment was still to come. A sudden flurry of doorbells shattered her tangled thoughts. A sick premonition rose in her chest as she made her way to the entrance. There stood Emily Parker, her sharp gaze softened now by deep sorrow. Emily said nothing, only held out a light brown dossier. Victoria frowned, her voice hoarse with exhaustion. "What are you doing here, Emily? Isn't this enough?" Emily shook her head and stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Her voice was gentle, but carried unmistakable weight. "I've come for Adrian, Victoria. There are things you need to know, the truth Adrian uncovered before he died." Emily's words clamped around Victoria's heart like an iron vice. She closed the door and fought to steady her voice as her hands began to tremble uncontrollably. "What do you mean about Adrian?" Emily approached the antique wood table at the room's center and laid the dossier down as if placing a sacred offering. "Adrian discovered everything, Victoria. Before he died, he knew about all your money-laundering schemes, your massive bribes, and the shell corporations you ran behind everyone's backs." Victoria stood frozen, her face ashen, eyes wide with horror. In that moment, memories of the gentle, submissive boy she thought she knew, Adrian, who had never challenged her, flashed before her in agonizing clarity. Emily's tone was steady, each word a precise blade. "He didn't just know." Adrian quietly gathered evidence. "The documents you thought destroyed, he kept them safe. He never wanted to confront you until he uncovered the truth about Jessica's death, and then saw the full extent of your ruthless greed." "Jessica," Victoria whispered, images of that young woman surfacing again, mingled with indescribable pain. Emily met her gaze without pity. "Yes, Adrian learned you betrayed the family, betrayed Robert Blackwood, Jessica's father, to seize power. But what shattered him most was discovering how you used dark connections to bury the truth. He tried to reason with you, but you responded only with cold pride. In the end, he decided to act. He prepared those files for the authorities, but..." Victoria felt the ground give way beneath her. Her legs trembled as Emily's words cut through her soul. "But what happened? Adrian, what happened to him?" Emily's voice softened with sorrow. "He never finished. The accident you always called misfortune was actually a murder, staged by those in your service who found out Adrian was about to expose your darkest secrets." "No!" Victoria nearly screamed, despair and panic breaking free. "I never wanted Adrian dead." Emily's eyes were cold, but filled with a strange compassion. "Maybe you didn't give the order yourself, but your boundless ambition and endless greed led to your son's death. Adrian died trying to stop your crimes, to protect his own honor and his son's future." Victoria collapsed into the nearest chair, clutching her head, tears at last flowing freely after years of iron control. All her strength, her cold authority, had vanished, leaving only a mother stricken with guilt, realizing she had indirectly destroyed her own child. Emily stepped forward, her voice gentler now. I've spent 3 years preparing for this day, not just for revenge, Victoria. I've done this for Adrian because he deserved to be remembered as a brave man who stood up against the injustice and cruelty wrought by his own mother. Victoria lifted her tear-streaked face to Emily, eyes brimming with genuine remorse and anguish. What? What can I do now? I never wanted Adrian to die like this. Emily shook her head, her gaze resolute yet pained. You can't change the past, Victoria. But now you must face the truth. You lost your son to your own indifference and avarice. Adrian is gone, but his true legacy is the truth I hold in these files. Tyler deserves to know his father, that Adrian lived and died a hero, not a pawn under his mother's shadow. Without another word, Emily turned and walked away, leaving Victoria alone in deafening silence. She understood in that moment that her life had irrevocably changed. Adrian's death was no longer an accident. It stood as an indelible stain on her soul. And more than anything, Victoria realized that the one responsible for Adrian's death was none other than herself, the mother who once believed that power and prestige were worth any sacrifice. Now she felt with crushing clarity that the true price of her greed had been her own son's life. Victoria remained motionless in the vast sitting room, her vacant eyes staring into empty space as Emily's words echoed in her mind, reminders of the terrible consequences her own ambition and greed had wrought. But that painful silence was abruptly broken by the sound of confident footsteps growing louder at the front door of the mansion. Moments later, a firm knock rang out, followed by a powerful voice calling, "FBI! Victoria Blackwood, we have a warrant for your arrest." Victoria's heart pounded. She felt her breath catch in her throat. Slowly, she rose, legs trembling, and walked toward the door. As it swung open, agents in black suits flooded in, their expressions cold and merciless. A tall agent stepped forward, presenting an official document. Victoria Blackwood, you are under arrest for charges of money laundering, tax fraud, corruption, and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent. The agent's words sounded distant to Victoria. She could no longer react. Everything played out before her like an unending nightmare. In that instant, she recalled every wrong decision, every ruthless step she'd taken to achieve her power, only to see it all rendered meaningless. Escorted from her mansion, she stepped into a sea of reporters and flashing cameras. Questions shouted from every direction, but all Victoria could see was one face: Emily Parker, standing quietly beside federal agents and her attorney. Emily's gaze was stern yet compassionate, a final judgment on Victoria's deeds. As Victoria was guided toward the waiting FBI vehicle, Emily took one decisive step forward and spoke in a soft but clear voice. "Mrs. Blackwood, you always believed money and power would protect you. In the end, they only brought suffering and death. Adrian is gone, but his truth and justice are only just beginning." Victoria offered no reply, only looked at Emily with pain and despair before the door shut, marking the complete collapse of the empire she once ruled. The very next day, emergency court sessions convened. Blackwood Industries was formally suspended, its assets frozen. The shocking news spread like wildfire, an entire city abuzz at the tragic downfall of the once untouchable magnate. In the crowded courtroom, Emily Parker stood at the podium, her confident voice filling the room. "Your Honor, the court must recognize that Tyler, the son of Adrian Blackwood, is the sole rightful heir to the Blackwood estate. I withheld this truth for his protection, shielding him from dangers within his own family. But now that everything is exposed, Tyler must receive what is legally and justly his." Attorney Michael Bennett stepped forward and presented the evidence clearly. Your Honor, here are the certified birth records, DNA tests, and the valid will executed by Adrian Blackwood before his death. Under the law, all Blackwood Industries assets and family holdings are to be transferred to Tyler Blackwood. A stunned silence fell over the courtroom. Emily glanced back at Victoria, seated, pale, her eyes filled with deep regret. For the first time, Victoria was utterly powerless as her fortune, influence, and status were handed to the grandson she once refused to acknowledge and the young woman she once scorned. Weeks later, in her cozy apartment, Emily gently held sleeping Tyler in her arms. On the table lay the court's official decree declaring Tyler Blackwood the sole legal heir of the Blackwood family. Amanda Torres sat nearby, smiling warmly. Justice has finally prevailed, Emily. Your 3 years of effort were not in vain. Emily nodded, her gaze soft as she looked at Tyler. It wasn't wealth or prestige I wanted most, Amanda. What matters is that Tyler grows up embraced by truth, knowing his father sacrificed everything for justice, and that his mother is a woman who loves him unconditionally. That is Adrian's greatest legacy to his son. Amanda took Emily's hand, her voice rich with emotion. I know Adrian would be proud of you. You didn't just secure justice for him. You proved that real power comes from love, courage, and unwavering integrity. Emily returned her aunt's smile, then looked out the window with calm resolve. She understood the hardest battle was over, and now Tyler would grow up in honesty, fairness, and love. Things Adrian had longed for but never received from his mother. As for Victoria, alone in her cold, lonely cell, she sat staring at the blank white wall. The painful quiet surrounded her as she at last fully grasped the steep price of her blind ambition. In her heart echoed the undeniable truth. She had lost everything: power, money, reputation, and even her only son, brought down by nothing less than her own boundless greed. For months, Victoria Blackwood's days in prison crawled by, heavy and unforgiving. The lavish life of wealth and power she once relished was now a distant, fading memory. In the cramped, icy cell, Victoria often sat in silence, staring at the gray wall, reflecting on every mistake she'd made, mistakes that had cost her son his life and ultimately stripped her of everything. Night after night, when the prison lights went out, Victoria would wake and lie staring at the empty ceiling. A soft, sorrowful sigh would escape her, her mind drifting back to Adrian, her only son, whom she'd ignored, belittled, and then lost forever. Memories long buried surged up like a storm, haunting her with regret and sorrow. One gloomy Friday morning, the guard approached her cell door and announced in a steady voice, "Blackwood, you have a visitor." Victoria rose slowly and stepped into the small, dimly lit visitation room. When the door opened, her heart jolted as she saw Emily Parker seated on the other side of the table. Emily's demeanor was calm and respectful. Her eyes no longer bore anger or coldness, but rather sympathy and compassion. Victoria sat down opposite her, hands trembling beneath the table. In a hushed, wavering voice, she said, "I didn't expect you to come, Emily." Emily looked into Victoria's weary, desperate eyes and nodded gently. "I'm not here to accuse you, Victoria. I'm here to talk about Tyler, your grandson." At the mention of Tyler, a flicker of hope returned to Victoria's eyes. Her voice shook as she asked, "Is he all right?" Emily offered a warm smile and nodded. "Tyler is doing very well. He's healthy, happy, and growing up surrounded by love and care. I thought you should know that." Victoria met Emily's gaze, tears glistening as she finally let them fall freely. "You truly love him. don't you?" Emily's eyes were earnest and unwavering as she replied, "I love Tyler as if he were my own, Victoria. Not because he's a Blackwood heir or for his inheritance, but because he's Adrian's son and because he deserves unconditional love. That's what Adrian wanted most in the world." Victoria bowed her head, shame and pain washing over her as memories of her cold, indifferent treatment of Adrian resurfaced. "I was so wrong, Emily. I thought money and power were everything, that they would bring me happiness. But now I see I never truly knew how to love anyone, not even my only son. Adrian left this world without ever hearing those words from me." Gently, Emily reached across the table and took Victoria's trembling hand. Her voice was softer than before. "Adrian understood you better than anyone, Victoria. He was deeply hurt by your neglect, yet, even at the end, he hoped you'd change. He never hated you. He just wished you'd realized what mattered sooner." Victoria squeezed Emily's hand, tears streaming down her face, as if washing away her past mistakes. "Emily, if you can, please tell Tyler that I am so sorry. Tell him that his grandmother, though too late, finally understands that family and love are the most important things I lost." Emily nodded compassionately. "I promise, Victoria. Tyler will grow up knowing the truth and knowing forgiveness and compassion. He'll know that, despite your mistakes, you are still his grandmother, and that your heart has changed even if it's late." Victoria sat in silence, tears falling, feeling the full weight of regret and sorrow. For the first time in her life, she truly grasped the priceless value of love and family, things she had once ignored, dismissed, and ultimately lost. When visiting hours ended, Emily stood, offering Victoria one last compassionate look. "You've made mistakes, but you still have a chance to make amends, Victoria. Live the rest of your life in truth and sincerity. That's what Adrian most wanted." Victoria nodded, a measure of peace softening her grief. As Emily left, Victoria returned to her cell, feeling a peace she'd never known before. Though confined to a cold, cramped prison, for the first time she felt truly free. Free from blind ambition, free from the haunting lure of power and wealth. Most importantly, she finally understood the profound, priceless meaning of love and family, though that understanding had come far too late. Victoria never forgot those final words she spoke to Emily in that visitation room. They echoed in Emily's mind for years afterward. As Emily's footsteps carried her away from the prison that day, they felt lighter, as though the weight she'd borne for so long had finally been lifted. A new chapter in Emily's life had begun, one not defined by vengeance or sorrowful plots, but by hope and love. Time passed swiftly, and Tyler grew up in a world completely different from the darkness his Blackwood heritage once knew. Emily was determined to give him a peaceful, joyful childhood, one in which he always felt the warmth and unconditional love she showered on him. Through extraordinary effort and unwavering resolve, Emily completed her MBA at one of the city's top universities. On graduation day, she stood on stage, diploma in hand, her eyes shining as she looked down at the audience, where Tyler, now a more mature boy, waved proudly at his mother. Soon after graduation, Emily launched her own firm, Parker Ventures, and achieved remarkable success in both investment and community development. Her company grew rapidly, earning praise not only for its financial performance, but for its social responsibility, supporting hundreds of struggling families and funding educational opportunities for underprivileged children. One warm autumn evening, Emily and Tyler sat together on the porch of their new home, gazing out at the small garden they had tended together over the years. Tyler, now intelligent and perceptive, yet still delightfully innocent and kind-hearted, turned to his mother and asked, "Mom, You were really angry at Grandma for what she did to Dad, weren't you?" Emily looked deeply into his eyes, gently taking his small hand. "I was, honey. But I've learned that everyone makes mistakes. And the most important thing is forgiveness and compassion. Your grandmother paid dearly for her errors, and I believe she truly regrets them." Tyler nodded thoughtfully, his gaze full of affection. "I understand, Mom. I'm not mad at Grandma anymore. I just wish Dad could be here with us now." Emily squeezed his hand and smiled with pride. "Your dad is always with us, Tyler. He watches over you and is so proud of the person you are becoming. The greatest lesson he taught me, and what I want you to remember, is that real value lies in love and family. Never let anger or greed cloud the love we have for one another." Tyler returned her smile, his eyes reflecting hope and confidence. He knew the Blackwood family's painful past had become a powerful lesson, guiding him toward a brighter future. In that peaceful moment, Emily realized her life had truly transformed, free from the shadows of hatred and past darkness. Now, her sole mission was to ensure that Tyler, and the generation to come, always understood the true worth of love, forgiveness, and sincerity. The very ideals Adrian had cherished most. And in that deeply moving moment, Emily knew. Her arduous journey over the years had finally led to a secure, love-filled future, one worthy of all that Adrian had sacrificed. Sitting on the familiar wicker chair on the front porch, Emily quietly watched Tyler play in the gentle glow of the late afternoon sun. His clear, bright laughter blended with the rustling of leaves in the soft breeze, creating an almost uncanny sense of peace. In that moment, Emily's heart realized that all the pain and loss of her past seemed to melt away as she witnessed Tyler growing stronger each day, surrounded by love, joy, and absolute safety. Unconsciously, Emily smiled, a profound relief filling her chest, something she had been searching for all these years. Revenge had never truly been her goal, even when she once believed that justice could only be served by making Victoria pay. Now she understood that real victory did not lie in hurting someone else, but in the ability to rebuild a good life from the ruins of suffering. Tyler's laughter rang out again as he ran toward his mother, his soft hair dancing in the evening breeze. He threw his arms around Emily, his eyes shining with innocent sunshine. "Mom, I just planted the flowers you love. They're definitely going to bloom beautifully next spring." Emily gently brushed a lock of hair from her son's forehead, her gaze softer than ever. "You're amazing, sweetheart. Those flowers will be the greatest addition to our garden, and I know Dad will love them too." Tyler gave a thoughtful little smile. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about Grandma. I'm not angry with her anymore, but I want to live differently from her when I grow up. I want to be strong, to forgive, and to care for people, just like you and Dad always teach me." Emily squeezed Tyler's small hand, pride and emotion welling up in her heart at her son's sincere words. "I'm so proud of you, Tyler. Yes, your father and I want you to grow up successful in every way, but most importantly, we want you to be someone who knows how to love and empathize with others. That is the true measure of a person, and it's the one thing I want you to always remember." Tyler looked up at Emily with clear, warm eyes. "I'll remember, Mom. And one day, I'll teach these things to my own kids so that the mistakes of the past never happen again." Emily hugged Tyler close, a deep, steadfast happiness flooding her soul. She knew that all her efforts over the years had finally found real meaning. Not in making Victoria pay, but in building a hopeful future where Tyler could grow up in peace and complete love. As the sun dipped lower and the sky turned a blaze of amber, Emily gazed out toward the horizon, her heart overflowing with emotion. "Tyler, your father once told me that life is like a garden. Sometimes we have to pull out the weeds and clear away the ugly debris so that good things can grow. But the most important thing is never to let hatred take root in our hearts. Only love and compassion can make our garden bloom its most beautiful flowers." Tyler nodded thoughtfully, his expression suddenly more mature despite his young age. "I understand, Mom. You and Dad can count on me. I will always live by what you've taught me. I want to be someone who helps others so that no one has to suffer the way you and Dad did." Emily smiled radiantly, looking at Tyler with boundless love. "That is exactly what your father and I always hoped for, Tyler. And that is our true victory, not revenge, but the power to turn past pain into the strength to build a better future." When night fell and the first stars appeared in the deep blue sky, Emily sat beside Tyler in peaceful silence. In that serene, profound moment, she understood that life isn't about winning or losing, but a long journey where each of us can learn and grow from our mistakes and sorrows. She also realized she had achieved what Adrian had always wanted, not to defeat Victoria, but to create a new life full of hope for Tyler and for herself. A life built on kindness, forgiveness, and unshakable inner strength. A life not imprisoned by hatred or meaningless ambition. Looking up at the starry sky, she whispered softly to Adrian, the one she believed was always by her side, "We did it, Adrian. Now you can rest easy, knowing our Tyler will grow up to be the kind, compassionate person you always dreamed he'd be." Emily closed her eyes, a deep peace and joy filling her heart. Her true victory was not vengeance, but the building of a secure future where the painful mistakes of the past remain only lessons, and where love and compassion always triumph over hatred. Life may lead us down difficult and challenging paths, but the most important thing isn't revenge. It's how we rebuild from the wreckage of the past. Emily and Tyler's story proves that genuine love and compassion are stronger than any power or ambition. What about you? Have you ever overcome past wounds to build a better future? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt, meaningful stories. Thank you, and see you in the next video.